Welcome to Think Big with Dan and Qasim. Join hosts Dan Melnick and Qasim Masood as they explore big ideas, limitless possibilities, and engage with visionaries, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders who dare to dream big, get inspired, motivated, and find practical tips for personal growth. Think big, dream bigger, and ignite your potential.
Welcome to Think Big with Dan and Qasim, and our guest today is Josh. So Josh, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, tell us where you live and what you do.
Thanks for having me, Dan. My name is Josh Ebner. I am a AI and data science consultant. So I actually have done some training as well. So over the last 10 years, I've done data science training, largely B2C, business to consumer. So trying to get people skilled up in data science and analytics and machine learning. But over the last year or so, I've really pivoted hard into more like B2B consulting. So I can give you maybe a bit of a overview of what my career has been and kind of what got me to that place. And then we can, So I started in data science before we even called it data science. I love to say this because it's really strange. It's kind of strange to think about it. I've been doing it for about 20 years. I got involved in data science in 2004 is when I started. And I started at Bank of America. Now, we literally didn't call it data science. It was just called analytics. Now, when people say analytics, it's maybe a little bit more, that's conflated a little bit more with Google Analytics. But what we were doing was hardcore data analysis and statistical testing, old school A/B testing, planning A/B tests, stuff like that, and then building predictive models. So this was inside of Bank of America, inside of their marketing department. I did that for a few years, moved to a data engineering consultancy where we were more like building databases, but I was more on the data analysis side. When you're building a database, there's a lot of analytics that still needs to go into that to make sure the data is correct. So I worked for a consultancy called Knightsbridge that actually got acquired by Hewlett Packard. So technically on my bio, it says that I worked for HP, but really it was a small consultancy. Moved on eventually to Ogilvy. So marketers are probably familiar with the name David Ogilvy. Ogilvy had his ad agency. And by the time I got there, they had a digital consultancy called Ogilvy One. And that was really for digital marketing. And what I was doing, again, was marketing analytics, marketing data science, like hardcore data analysis using computer programs and statistics and things like that to figure out how to improve marketing campaigns, marketing and branding. So we had some very big customers. I worked for clients like Oscar Mayer and Kraft. There was a lot of consumer packaged goods at that point, but that's kind of what I did at Ogilvy. Went back to Bank of America for a little while longer, more marketing analytics and data science, and then moved on to Apple. And I worked at Apple for about a year and a half doing customer service, customer experience analytics. So let's say you buy a product and you maybe have a problem with your delivery or there's some sort of issue. I would analyze all of that data to try and figure out where the bottlenecks, where the problems, things like that. We also had customer service. So you call in, let's say you've had your computer, your phone for a year and a half. You have a problem with it, you call in or you chat with one of the chat representatives, all sorts of data there, customer experience, and then how satisfied they are. Now, this is really important, I think, for businesses because almost everything is downstream of satisfaction. I fundamentally believe that satisfaction is one of the most important metrics. So you're trying to market. If you have a product that people really hate or you have bad service and people really don't like interacting with your company, you cannot throw enough money at marketing to fix that problem, right? You will just burn through money. You have to fix a lot of the customer sat stuff. So I actually think that a lot of marketing problems are really hidden product and customer experience problems, but that's maybe a separate conversation. So did that for a year and a half, then left, started a data science training company. And now, like I said, I pivoted more into the consulting. So, and I've also kind of on top of the hardcore analytics skill set, I moved heavily into machine learning and now what we now call AI. But when I say that, I don't mean just like ChatGPT. I mean like building systems and doing more like strategic consulting for companies to help them figure out how are we actually going to implement this in a sound way? So that's kind of like the overview of who I am, how I got here, what do I do?
That's awesome. And just, to your point, yeah, like a lot of different unique experience being in this space for a while. So I'm curious, like as of now, right, with your consultancy, like who are you kind of focused on in terms of verticals or examples of, types of companies where you've kind of been able to help them out?
Yeah, a lot of this is, the sweet spot, I think, is mid-sized companies. Over the last 15 years, I think that there's been a playbook that's emerged inside of first the FANG companies, which I don't think should surprise anybody. The FANG companies are really good at this stuff. And if you go inside of a marketing organization or, even like finance, certainly Amazon operations, and you say data science and machine learning, they know exactly what you're talking about, and they can already tell you, here are the tools, here are the techniques to solve our problems. They know a lot of this stuff. It's kind of baked into how they operate.
Correct.
Starting maybe about 10 years ago, all of that stuff that was really refined inside of the Googles and the Facebooks, all of that stuff started filtering down into SaaS companies. So a lot of Silicon Valley startups and SaaS companies, they started getting a lot more sophisticated about how they use data and data science. Almost all of these companies, I would argue, are data centric. They are highly data centric. And that now means that they're also kind of like machine learning centric or even AI centric, although that means something different than I think many of your listeners might initially believe. But these are highly data centric and machine learning centric organizations. So, for example, like Netflix, it's really a machine learning and data company in some sense. It's like you turn on Netflix and it's recommending stuff. There's an algorithm behind the scenes that's recommending those things. And all of that is data driven and machine learning based. So with that framing, there's a whole set of companies now underneath the FANG, underneath the SaaS startups, and some quite successful, you call them startups. Some of these are, billion-dollar companies
Yeah.
at this point. The Atlassians are very good at this, stuff like that. There's a whole mid-market, right? From like, let's say 10 million all the way up to 100 million, a couple hundred
Right.
million, where there's a lot less sophistication. And that's, I think, a much bigger market. And that's kind of where I like to play. They have enough revenue and budget to be able to do some of this stuff. They have some data.
Mm.
They might actually have some data infrastructure, like databases already built. But then it's a matter of, okay, well, what do we do with that? And I think there's a pretty big opportunity for people like myself, but also for a lot of other people. I talk to a lot of other data consultants, and it's kind of at this point well understood by a lot of people that this whole mid-market, this is the next big opportunity.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so in terms of, like within the mid-market, right? Like, are you kind of focusing more on the sales and marketing side of things? Because like I always think, for example, I came from the manufacturing world and like obviously internally there's efficiencies with AI and data that you can use within a manufacturing company. But obviously there's also sales in terms of growth opportunities with existing customers or getting new customers. So where do you kind of see like your role as a consultant playing in, or is it kind of vary just depending on what type of organization it is?
It really depends. There are a variety of tools and techniques for different parts of the business, different business areas, so different verticals or horizontals. So it does really depend. A lot of my work has still been in marketing. So, for example, I know I said that I do mid-market, but I helped a very large, essentially a Fortune 50 company on some go-to-market strategy. So figuring out, it's a very large company, but it was a specific line of business and they needed some help with their go-to-market. And a lot of things like that, it's going to be, a set of techniques that we would refer to as, you've got segmentation, you've got A/B testing, you have customer analytics and things like that. And then maybe some customer targeting models and things of that nature. So that's some of the work that I've been doing with some of these big companies. That also works for certain smaller or mid-sized companies. But then I've also worked for, let's say, a small pharma company. It's more like a pharmaceutical services company. And they
Right.
just had some hardcore data analysis needs, trying to figure out where are the problems, where are the opportunities in this particular process. And I was helping them as well. I will say, I think that there's still a lot of opportunity. If you go into a marketing department at FANG, and you start talking about data science, certainly like segmentation
Right.
or customer analytics or retention modeling, things like that, building a machine learning system that can predict who's going to churn or not, for example.
Right.
They know all of this stuff. But if you go into that mid-market, I don't think a lot of companies really know you can do all of these things. A company might have a
Right.
churn problem, but they don't know you can build a predictive model to figure out who's going to churn. And you can also use certain techniques, for example, not only to predict who will churn, yes or no, but also to understand the drivers of churn,
Correct.
right? So if you use certain types of machine learning techniques, like decision trees are really good at this because the way that they work is very much like an if-then sort of tree structure. And you
Right.
can literally see, you throw in a bunch of input variables and you can see, oh, they're churning because, the service response times are over, 2 minutes for this particular customer. And, they have a low customer sat score and et cetera, et cetera. And you can sort of figure out like the combination
Right.
of features, the combination of data values that leads to things like churn. And then once you understand that at an analytical level, you can design interventions for that. So there's a lot of tools and techniques, and I don't think there's a lot of sophistication inside the market around what you can actually do and what types of problems you can solve. So you can, your product problem, you can use things like conjoint analysis to figure out which product features or combinations of features customers are likely to pay for. So it's not just which things will they like, but also what they'll pay for. You can use conjoint analysis, not really machine learning, more like analytics. You can certainly use other techniques like interview sentiment analysis, interview analytics, especially using large language models in certain ways now. You can do some of that. So there's this whole set of things inside like product and marketing and customer sat. Now to get to your question about things like manufacturing, I think this is going to be an absolutely huge market. Setting aside some of the politics, I know that there's a lot of stuff we're talking, in mid-April 2025, anyone turns on the TV, there's a lot of
Right.
argument and contention right now about political stuff,
Right. Yeah.
political and economic stuff that's going on right
Yeah.
now today. But one of the outcomes, I think, of what's going on is that we're very likely to have reshoring and nearshoring of manufacturing. And
Right.
when that happens, I'd actually love to hear your take on this. When that happens, we might not be able to do that with labor. The labor might be too
Right.
expensive in some cases if it's all just done by hand. I think there's going to be a lot of automation that happens. And
Exactly.
when that happens, what automation really is going to be is it's going to be like data and software and machine learning and AI. Like literally, I was just thinking today about a very famous machine learning guy, AI person named Andrew Ng. People in the industry, everyone knows who this guy is. He's like one of the godfathers of modern AI. And I saw a video of him a few years, not even, it was 6 months ago. And he was talking about working on a AI project. It was really a machine learning project. And what they were doing is they were taking images. He was consulting for this is kind of interesting, a frozen pizza factory, and they were using a camera to look at the pizzas that were coming out of the system, out of the manufacturing system. And they were using a technique called computer vision to analyze the quality and to find defects. So if there's like an asymmetry, literally an asymmetry in the cheese distribution on the pizza, they're using a camera to identify that and then automate that process. So you don't need to have a person visually inspecting. It can go a lot faster and maybe even be a little bit more accurate using an automated AI-driven, machine learning-driven system. So I think there's going to be a lot of stuff like this all the way through, parts and generating manufacturing things, analyzing the data to increase efficiency and optimize systems, things like that. I think there's going to be an absolutely huge opportunity over the next 5 years, 10 years.
100%. Yeah, I agree. I think it's you're going to see a lot more automation. I mean, jobs are going to change, right? People are going to be sort of responsible for maintenance on these AI tools. Maybe somebody watching them 24/7. That's kind of what the shifts might look like in some of these warehouses and manufacturing facilities. But yeah, it's definitely interesting to see kind of how things are, and some things have already changed. So
Yeah.
things are definitely changing very quickly.
So can you tell me a little bit about your manufacturing background and then kind of like what you're seeing? I'm very interested in how you're thinking about it. Are you excited about what's going on?
Yeah, 100%. So I was just a consultant for many years on the manufacturing side, like SAP implementations for manufacturing companies. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely exciting. I mean, listen, it's organizations, companies can save money, maximize efficiency. I mean, I think it's a very scary time for the people in the industry because many people are probably going to be out of work, but it's kind of figuring out, different jobs, different opportunities. There's obviously going to be new jobs created. So what
Yeah.
that's going to look like, because yeah, I mean, listen, there's always changes when it comes, like 100 years ago, you had 10 people on a machine, where today that you might have one, right? So there's always advancements like in technology, things have changed, but yeah, what is that going to look like? Will you still have maybe one person watching the AI tool or AI robot do its thing, right? So it's kind of, I mean, I'm not sure how that's going to work, but there's definitely going to be some different jobs and different opportunities.
Yeah. Hopefully, part of it's going to be machine maintenance, and then AI, having a human in the loop in some cases. There is literally a technique that we call human in the loop inside of
Right.
AI and machine learning, and having those humans in the loop of the automated AI system, I think will still be an opportunity. To your point, I think there's going to be fewer jobs needed than, let's say, 50 years ago inside of
Right.
a manufacturing plant. But if manufacturing and these plants come back at scale, there might still be quite a bit of opportunity for individuals, and certainly, guys like you that are in the industry helping build out these processes or systems.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely. So in terms of your business, right, obviously that we just started Q1 here of 2025. So what are some of your biggest goals and objectives for the rest of this year?
I think, a lot of it's just about growth and new sales channels, new marketing and sales channels. There's a very interesting article a couple of days ago by a guy named Andrew, I think it's Andrew Chen. Andrew Chen was the head of growth or head of marketing at Uber for a period of time. Now he's more like a Silicon Valley investor, and I guess you call him like a strategist. And then he writes a lot online. So he's got like a Substack and some of these other things. And he said the title of the article is "All Marketing Channels Suck." And it's effectively him saying, like, as it sounds like, everything right now is very difficult in terms of marketing. So I was doing SEO, I was getting a lot of clients with SEO. I actually got pretty good at it for a while. I think that AI is going to really crush SEO. And now I'm at this point where I'm trying to just figure out better sales and marketing channels for what I do, because as a business owner, people think that, and I think it's a very common mistake. People think that if I'm really good at what I do, then, it'll just magically work. And there's actually this whole other piece about running a business, getting clients, selling clients, increasing revenue. There's this whole business side that I've really had to learn. I considered myself to be a fairly advanced data scientist going back 10 years ago when I started my business, but
Right.
I didn't know a lot about, I knew about how to market inside of a, multi-billion-dollar company, but I didn't
Right.
know how to market a small company. So I had to learn that.
Right.
And
Right.
then,
Right.
I had to learn sales. I'm actually in the process of kind of learning a lot more about sales now, because it wasn't an area of expertise, but I had to learn a lot of other stuff about business. So I think the goal this year is really going to be like learning more about sales, and trying some different marketing techniques. I'm on LinkedIn. I think that's where we connected.
Yes.
And I'm on LinkedIn posting a lot of content. And so I've switched my content marketing from my blog, from my website, over to LinkedIn. I'm posting content every single day. And then, with that, there's a lot of testing, right? Like, it's, does this format work? Do these messages work? Are people interested in this topic or that topic? There's a lot of testing that goes on. So through the rest of this year, I'm going to be focused really a lot on that side, the content marketing piece, figuring out what actually gets traction on LinkedIn, and then scaling that out, building a sales process. I think, as an aside, I think that in person is going to be really important for business owners. I think that because all these old school marketing channels, SEO and PR and all this other stuff, it's kind of stopped working. Ads, if you can find, I don't know if you can, I'll send you the article from Andrew Chen. Maybe you can read it, and some of your viewers might be interested in it. But he kind of goes through, like, 6 or 7 different marketing channels that are not working. I actually think in person is going to be a big thing. A lot of the people that I'm talking with right now in a sort of a business mastermind, a business group of like-minded people that are also in consulting. I've been talking with them, and everyone's saying the same thing. They're like, "Oh yeah, I'm getting a ton of traction in person." right? Going to events,
Yeah,
going to stuff.
I agree.
So I think that's maybe a long-winded way of like sales and marketing and trying to figure out some of the pivot and shift. And then there's also so much going on with AI. It is moving so fast. I'm still spending time ramping up on some of the newest stuff. So more on the, getting even more sophisticated on some of the AI engineering pieces, learning some of the new techniques and things of that nature.
100%. Yeah, I mean, I think especially since COVID, more and more people are keen to, meet in person. People are stuck, just doing virtual things for so long. And yeah,
Yeah.
there's definitely lots of momentum there. So on that note, right? So if you could go back in time to before you started this business, what is the one biggest piece of advice that you wish you knew?
I actually think it's related to what I just said. So I've been running my company largely remote for about 10 years. Now, I did live in Austin for about 4 years. I still have a home base in Austin, but I've been running my company remote for a very long time, doing sort of like more of a digital nomad style of living and running a business. And if I had one piece of advice, it's probably to be less remote. I actually think that being in person is really important. And the place that you live and the network that you have is very important. I think, especially in consulting, it's a relationship business. And I think a lot of the opportunities come from relationships. I think that relationships are really important in business and in life. And where you live does make a difference because I think the best relationships are built in person. With respect, we're connecting over Zoom, but I think the best relationships are built in person.
I agree.
And I think it's really important. And to maybe I'm going to drop all the Silicon Valley names on the on the episode. So there's a guy, very famous Silicon Valley guy named Naval Ravikant, which many people are probably familiar with. And I think I saw a podcast of his. He was a guest on a podcast, Modern Wisdom, Chris Williams, Modern Wisdom,
Yeah.
a couple days, like 2 weeks ago. And he said it, I think, on that podcast, but he also said it in the past, maybe a few years ago on X, on Twitter. And he
Yeah.
said, among the top three most important decisions you make, it's who you marry,
Right.
what work you do, and then where you live. And that third one is the one that I maybe didn't understand, being remote. And I think that where you choose to live and then building relationships in person, super important. So I think
Exactly. I agree with
that's
that
mine.
100%. So if somebody watching this wanted to reach out to you, wanted to work with you, do you mind sharing your social media or website? I guess best ways to get in contact.
Best way, reach out to me, LinkedIn. I am on LinkedIn. My full name is Joshua Ebner, and that's E as in Echo, B as in Bravo, N-E-R, Joshua Ebner. So look me up. The picture that I have on LinkedIn, I have a full beard here. I do not have a full beard on my LinkedIn. So you can find me there. I also have a website. It's sharpsightlabs.com. That's SHARPSIGHTLABS.com. It's a little bit long. I'm actually probably going to switch it to sharpsight.ai, which I own. So maybe look for Sharpsight. You can probably Google it and, Sharpsight Data Science or Sharpsight AI. If you Google it, you'll probably find it. And those are the places to find me.
Well, Josh, thanks so much for your time today. Of
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
course.